Now give me a beat.
Since he joined his first band in rural Victoria, Brett Garsed has moved steadily onward to become one of the most exciting and groundbreaking guitarists to ever come out of the land of Oz. After being spotlighted in Guitar Player magazine, he came to the attention of Aussie megastar John Farnham and spent the next 4 years recording and touring all over the world. The buzz began to spread, and in 1990 he got the call from the LA-based rock group Nelson, bringing Brett to America for the first time. 92 saw the release of Quid Pro Quo, his acclaimed duet album with T.J. Helmrich. And now you have a chance to see close up the unique blend of technique and melodic control that have put him in the front rank of musical innovators. So grab your guitar, mate, and get ready to turn your world upside down.
Hi, I'm Brett. Welcome to my part of the show. So here we are at the lovely MI recording studios. Nice big clean SSL behind me here. And I guess what we're going to do is discuss my bizarre approach to guitar and life and the universe. So we're basically going to do it in 3 bits. I guess we're going to do the first part will be like left-hand technique, legato, 4-note per string ideas, that sort of thing. The second part will be like right-hand technique, finger picking, all that sort of stuff. And then at the end, we're going to try and jam it all into some sort of coherent form so you can actually understand it and learn something from it, I hope. So without any further ado, it's time to dive straight into the REH tradition, the tune-up. And I was sweating over this, and I figured, what am I going to do, sit there and stare at the camera while you guys tune up? So I thought I might catch up on some heavy reading. So you know, you guys, I mean, I know I'm in tune, so you guys just go ahead, do your thing, and I'll tune up, you know. Okay, the first thing I guess we're going to touch on here is legato technique. In the world of music, I know legato means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but to guys like you and me and gals like the gals out there that are in love with this weird thing here, it means incorporating hammer-ons and pull-offs with the left hand rather than alternate picking every note. I got into this when I first started to play because I was pretty much self-taught and I didn't realize that alternate picking even existed. I just sort of figured I liked the sound of the legato approach, and it was easy. It was a lot easier to play more intricate runs without having to worry about where your pick was and upstrokes and downstrokes. And it wasn't until later on that someone pointed out to me that I wasn't alternate picking that I almost considered giving up. And luckily, I sought out other players like Alan Holdsworth that inspired me to continue, because then I realized that there's no right or wrong way. There's just whatever you like to hear. And I definitely really liked the sound of legato playing. So Holdsworth actually influenced my note choice a lot too, which we'll probably get into later. But the first two things you'll probably find out about legato playing is, number one, you tend to think this way along the neck. You don't really think crossways. You tend to think this way because it's more beneficial to stack as many notes on one string as you possibly can. And if you're into two-handed playing like my partner in crime, T.J. Helmrich, that's anywhere up from 8 notes to however many you can get in there. So that's probably the first thing you'll encounter. The second thing is you'll probably find that it's actually harder to play slow than it is to play fast. And what I mean by that is it's not hard to play just slow, but slow and in the pocket and in time with the band or the metronome or the drum machine or whatever you're playing along with. So we'll get into that later, I guess. What we'll do first is explore a few lines and how I initially started when I got into legato playing. So when I first started to play, I guess I played normal scale shapes like this little guy here, just normal old A major. You know, real simple stuff like that. It wasn't too involved. And then, like I said, when I heard Holdsworth, I heard a lot of the passing tones and chromatic stuff that he did. And even though my ears weren't anywhere near as sophisticated enough to really tell what he was doing, how I interpreted that was he was just filling in the blanks. To me, it was like filling in the spaces in between the scale notes. And what that meant to me was 4 notes per string. And so the initial way I started was just simple chromatic things, just 4 half steps in a row like that, because it was easy for my fingers, no big stretches, and I hadn't really elevated that level yet, so it was still pretty primitive, but it gives a pretty nice effect. I'll just sort of try and wind the clock back and remember how I used to play this stuff. So, you know, it gives a nice sort of rolling effect, like a roller coaster type of thing. And once you actually figure out a few little scales and positions where you can use this stuff, it sounds really nice. Gives you some nice chromatic passing tones and gives you a lot of variation too. You probably wouldn't want to do it all the time because it'd get kind of repetitive and boring, but you know, that's part of the learning process, I guess. So anyway, what I really did was I would take simple things like this major scale shape I started with and fill in the blanks. So instead of simply playing, I would play, and so I would get more notes for my finger mileage, you know. So what I would do is I would take that and expand upon it as far as I could. Take stuff like that, and you can go backwards and forwards like this. So it's a very cool approach. It's totally limitless in its applications, and it's easy on the hands, and it's very effective for spicing up otherwise mundane-sounding scales. So you can apply it to anything. It works really well around chromatic ideas, actually. Not chromatic, pentatonic ideas, I should say, because they're all pretty much arranged pretty straightforward across the neck with lots of 4 semitone gaps. Like if you take like A minor pentatonic like this, you can see on the first 2 strings here you've got a couple of nice little 4-note per string lines there. So instead of just going, you can go. Same on the way up. There's a nice 4-note per string gap there. So it works really great with that sort of stuff. And of course, you know, major, minor pentatonics, you can just apply the same technique and shift positions, and you'll be able to play over major scales and major chords and minor chords, that sort of thing. And the same thing applies to just straight scales. If you take like that same major shape I showed before, what I would do is work out a little pattern like this. And just like I said, filling in the gaps. You'll probably notice that my pick attack is extremely light. This isn't a rule, but it's because I vary it from time to time. Obviously, you want dynamics. But while you're playing legato runs, if you want that effect of just a smooth, flowing, continuous line, you can't really blend in like. You know, it's just not going to work. You've got to adjust your dynamics to the point where the pick is almost the same velocity as the hammer-on or the pull-off. So, and also another important thing I should mention about the subject of pull-offs, you don't really want to drastically pull your fingers down. You don't want to go. What you really want to do is just gently lift this finger and slam the other one down. Slam it down, but press down with enough velocity to make the note happen. So it's. And you may notice that I actually add quite a few pick notes in there as well, because sometimes, as with the third finger you'll find on your left hand, it's quite weak, so it's hard to get enough velocity out of that to really make the note happen. So a lot of times in a descending pattern like that, I will use an upstroke and a downstroke for the 4th finger and the 3rd finger, then the other 2 will hammer on like this. But always making sure that the velocity of the pick is not too harsh that it stands out, so you get a nice flowing effect. So it's a very gentle touch. You'll also notice I'm using a lot of my fingers on my right hand, but we'll get into that later. So we've already started with the chromatic ideas, little 4 half steps, and what I later expanded this to was trying to play scale lines with 4 notes per string. And the first thing I discovered about this was that it's kind of tough because I'm not exactly gifted with a massive stretch like some people, and I have fairly normal-sized hands. So anyone out there with a similar problem, I can relate. So this isn't for the genetically gifted only. So if I could figure out a way around it, you guys can too. So the first thing I did was I picked the easiest shape possible to play, which is whole step, half step, whole step. That fits really natural for your fingers like that. It's very hard to get any sort of gap in between there, unless you're Mr. Spock, of course. So I generally worked out patterns that involve that sort of shape. If I was playing a minor type thing, I would generally play it like this. That's A Dorian, but you know what I'm getting at. So any sort of shape where it was like whole step and a half step in between there, that's what I generally started with. And eventually I got comfortable with the idea to the point I would generally sort of include it in with my other chromatic little lines so I could get effects like this. That's about as far as I'd go with it at first because I was still testing the waters with it. But then as I got into it later on, I decided to explore playing longer lines with it. So the first way I really experimented with it was, of course, learning a major scale, simple A major scale, 4 notes per string, all the way up and down the neck, like this. Like that. I practiced it for a while, and I think in the hopes of getting it up to mind-boggling speed, and it didn't really happen. And then I sort of realized that if you actually did play that in a piece of music, it would definitely sound like something you would spend a long time practicing. So the last thing you ever want to do is include a practice regimen in your playing. That's got nothing to do with music, you know. It's supposed to be a means to an end. So the way I would utilize that in my playing was I would generally utilize it as a way of maneuvering around the neck. I would rarely ever do it on more than 2 strings in a row, but it's a really fantastic way to break out of box patterns. And I say this because a lot of people that have ever come to me for lessons or anything like that, they've generally been 3 note per string kind of players, and it's a really handy technique to bust out of that mold. And you don't have to throw away all the 3 note per string stuff you ever learned. You can just incorporate this on 1 string and it will throw you into a different part of the neck. So if you take like a 3 note per string scale for A major like this, you're sort of generally locked in around this position here, between the 5th and the 10th fret. And if you want to bust out of that and get up to the 12th, 15th fret really fast, all you've got to do is just 2 strings, 4 notes per string. So, and you're up there. And the same with going down. It's moving up and down the neck. It's a tremendous way to traverse the neck so that you're not stuck in any one position. If you're having trouble with stretches, there's a way around that by using slurs or slides or whatever you want to call them. You don't have to always play like 1, 2, 3, 4 fingers like this. Like you don't have to always go. You can just use these 3 fingers so you can get a bigger stretch, and then slide the last one so you can. I use that all the time, and it's way more comfortable, and plus you can actually get 5 notes per string, so which I use a lot. So you can do things like. And there's actually a major pattern which I've worked out, which you may find helpful, which goes all the way up and then back down again, and at the note up here it has a slur, and at the bottom down here it has a slur. So it's 5 notes per string at each end of it. So it starts off like this. During that passage you may have noticed that I generally picked the first 2 notes of each 4 note per string pass, so referring back to the pick coming into play with legato playing a lot more than people like to think. You do have to pick a lot of notes just to get the accents in the right place, so once again I'll do that and you can check that out. Okay, I should point out that this also works for minor scales as well, and this is one point where you will notice that there's quite a few stretches involved, but once again I want to point out that you can use the slurs instead of doing those huge stretches. So first I'll just play the simple minor scale, A minor. So. So as you can see, once again, it's not too bad for the very first position. That's pretty normal. That's our easy shape. But then, of course, you get this guy. So kind of a nasty little stretch there, the half step and then 2 whole steps. And then at one point, you actually get 4 whole steps in a row. So if that tends to be a problem, pull in the old slurring trick and do this. Okay, so I'm going to put on my hypnotic metronomic drum machine here, and I'll just play some lines, and you can see that it really is quite a challenge, and to stay in that pocket, you know, stay back in the groove, and especially with something like a drum machine too, because they never change, they never move, they don't fluctuate. Like a real drummer can hear different tempo changes from you and maybe compensate, but not the machine. So I'll probably start just playing like quarter notes at first, and then I'll get more adventurous playing triplets, stuff like that. And also pay attention to the fact the lines themselves have to be in time with themselves. You can't have things like this going on. You can't be going. That cannot happen. It's got to be in time with itself like this. So at all times. So it has a nice flowing effect to it, and that will greatly improve your chances of staying in time with the drum machine or the rhythm section. Notice how I use a lot of slurs, stuff like that, to get different phrasing ideas. What I'll do is I'll probably play pretty much with the drum machine at first, then I'll get more adventurous, and you'll see how I'm pretty much unhampered by any sort of 3-note per string or triplet concepts, things like that. Rhythmically, it's very free, and also note-wise around the neck, it's very free. No positions or box patterns or anything like that. So without further ado, let's get into it. You may have noticed in conjunction with the pick, I use my fingers a lot. And this started out of just habit. I have no idea why I started doing it. I noticed one day, I guess I've been playing for about 3 years, and I noticed one day that this middle finger here decided to work in conjunction with the pick for some reason, and I have no idea why, but I just decided to go with it. I've always adopted that sort of approach, like, if it happens, and don't fight it. So later on, I took classical guitar lessons for about a year, and that could have influenced the development of the other fingers coming into play. So I think it was probably from doing things like this with classical playing, like... And when I would naturally pick up an electric guitar again, I'd start... So I'd play the same thing, but I'd have to use, like, the last 3 fingers on my hand in conjunction with the pick instead of the thumb and the first 3 fingers. So I sort of kept doing it out of habit, and then a few years later I decided to actually explore it a little bit further, because I noticed some licks were creeping into my playing, utilizing this technique, and I thought, well, you know, it's there, I may as well explore it. And what I didn't realize, it was actually an incredible turning point for me, because remember how I said with legato you tend to think this way all the time. Consequently, I had no arpeggio ideas at all, pretty much, because I had my lack of picking ability, I think, hampered my thought process for any sort of cross-picking or anything like that. So I just kept trying to stack everything on strings, thinking this way. If I ever did an arpeggio, like if someone ever played, I'd try and play it like... I'd have to try and play it like that, try and work out arpeggios with string skipping and stuff like that. So it always utilized hammer-ons, because I couldn't do any sweep picking or any sort of arpeggio type stuff. So the finger picking really was a godsend to me, in the sense that it totally gave me this whole different outlook on the neck and a whole new bunch of ideas to try out. So the first thing, I guess, you would want to really check out is a little exercise kind of thing to get a bit of strength developed in your right hand. And I'll point out here right now that if you're slapping your foreheads and going, oh no, you know, I've just spent 10 years working on my alternate picking and my sweep picking, this guy's telling me to grow fingernails and, you know, take up finger picking. Don't think that. I mean, all the ideas that I'm presenting here, you can alternate pick them, you can sweep pick them, and you don't even have to play legato if you don't want. You can still do the 4-note per string thing and pick every note. So I'd hate to see somebody throw away years of hard work just because they thought they had to take up another approach. But it's the concept that's really cool, so I just wanted to share that with you. I have one little warm-up exercise that I do just to get the fingers and the right hand warmed up in general. It uses a very simple little major 7 shape, like just that sort of thing. And what I do is I just roll backwards and forwards. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 3, 2, 1, backwards and forwards, alternating between this pair and this pair, just to get a bit of strength developed between those two guys. And I just simply do this. Okay, so I guess you've probably seen from that extreme close-up, I have slight fingernails. They go slightly past the flesh of the finger. It's no big deal. You don't really have to, you know, get that hardcore about growing your fingernails or anything. I keep them filed pretty short so they don't get in the way of everything. And it's actually part of the smooth sort of percussive nature of this technique. Part of it lies in the fact that it's the flesh of the finger that hits the string first, and then the nail follows through. You can sort of hear it. Okay, there's another nice little exercise you can use, and I actually use this playing. I very rarely use that first warm-up in a musical context, but this next one I use quite a bit. It's like a nice rolling, it's just 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, rolling across each set of 4 strings. So it's like this group, then this group, and then back again. So it sounds quite nice on acoustic guitar too, if you want to do that. And I put a little trill at the start just to turn it around so it stays in rhythm. So. Okay, so some of the initial simple ideas that I came up with from this technique were actually based around our little friend, the major 7 arpeggio, the little or chord, I guess. And the first thing I did with that was take that same shape and apply it to the other strings. And of course, if you try that, you'll find they're not too musical. You know, I have no real desire for a thing like that. I want to have something that's going to make music. So what I did was I worked out a way to play that on those groups of strings while still being musical, and this is it. So you can see how that really slots in there really nicely. Has a nice flowing effect to it, and believe me, the possibilities all stemming from our little pal there are absolutely limitless. I sort of based a lot of my thought process around that shape, that sort of diagonal shape across the neck, and the first thing I did was expand the intervals to find what other possibilities there were. So if we started with a major shape, so if you're playing an A major, our old buddy works well. If it's A minor, you have to just stretch your fingers a little bit. Any sort of altered stuff. And pentatonics work great too. They're a bit of a stretch, but what you generally do if you want to play A pentatonic, all you have to do is start on the fifth, and you get a really nice minor pentatonic. And it's 4 whole steps all on the way, so it is kind of a stretch. But for someone like me who hasn't got much picking technique, it allows me to play a pentatonic run, which I would otherwise find kind of clumsy. So just stretch your fingers out like that, and when you incorporate the major 7 idea with that, you get a really nice ascending pattern. And all you have to do is tag it with a little slur on each string. It'll be either the first string or the 4th string, and you can continue on up the neck, and you'll hear it. You may notice with some of the minor shapes, this is an individual thing too. I find it a little easier if I'm playing the minor shape, which is like this. I find it easier to bar the 2 strings, the 2nd and 3rd string, with my 2nd finger, rather than trying to play it with the 2nd and 3rd finger. I just find that a little simpler, and it's a lot less to think about when you're playing fast or something like that, or my fingers get tangled up, so it's a lot easier for me to go rather than try and juggle my fingers around. So it's a personal thing, if you want to get in, just get into that, just find a shape and then figure out the most comfortable fingering for you. But that's definitely the most comfortable for me. So it's important when you're combining ideas like arpeggiated ideas with sweep picking or finger picking, and you're combining them with legato playing, don't make the picking parts too dominant over the legato playing, otherwise it'll sound completely out of context. If I start a line with that, the next thing that follows could either be another finger-picked idea, it could be, or it could be a legato line, like. The one cool benefit about this whole technique is actually its limitation. The fact that it's really awkward to try and play 6-string arpeggios. The good thing is, by its very nature, it's really easy to play just 2 strings, 3 strings, 4 strings, so you can get things like this happening. Or you can play 4 strings, 2 strings, and you can even get 5-string ideas going. It's a little more awkward, but they do happen. So. Notice how it's almost impossible to really pinpoint what's happening at any one time, and that's because the two things are so interwoven that there is no real differentiation between the two. It's just one big style now. So what I should do now is probably turn on our old friend, the drum machine, and just improv for a while and move around the neck and give you a chance to check this out at close quarters. I first began to play guitar at about the age 12 upon hearing Ritchie Blackmore play the intro to Speed King. From then on, I became like a complete Blackmore fanatic. And from then on, I got into Jeff Beck, Eric Clapton. I was very influenced by Rory Gallagher. Then my tastes sort of changed a bit when I heard Larry Carlton and heard somebody playing some chord changes with the greatest of ease and decided to try and pursue that approach. And then, of course, Eddie Van Halen came along. Eddie's such a standard influence, you almost forget to mention the guy. And then the turning point was probably hearing Alan Holdsworth, and he definitely changed my harmonic sense. And I'd say the next turning point was probably hearing Scott Henderson, who influenced me a great deal on learning to play at a slower tempo with good time and good phrasing. So his playing's had a profound effect on me. And also, working with T.J. Helmrich's had a massive impact on me. So T.J.'s playing has influenced me a great deal. another thing that's really evolved for me over the years, and this technique has really helped it, is my note choice. And it's probably due to listening to a lot of people like Alan Holdsworth, Scott Henderson, a lot of fusion players, and actually primarily guitarists that are probably influenced by horn lines. I got it on the back end, like most guys. Most of the guys I listen to are influenced by horn players, and I'm influenced by guitarists who are influenced by horn players. So that's probably just standard territory for the legato technique, I guess. But when I generally play over something like just a straight A chord, like a Mixolydian sort of thing, I never limit myself to just the notes in that scale. I never stick always around. What I do is I incorporate my little chromatic concept, and it's got to the point where now it isn't always 4 semitones in a row or something like that. It's busted up to the point where it's pretty much just random. So if I was going to play a line like, what I would probably do is just play, instead of playing, I would probably just play. So instead of getting, we get. It sounds really, I like that because it sounds really out to play that E flat, and it, I like the sound of that. So, and what I do is apply that, lots of flat fives, things like that. And when you play them up to tempo, they have a nice flowing feel to them. And also, another thought process I use over static chord changes, like if you were just playing over that A7 sort of vibe there, a lot of times I'll base my ideas around other chords. I would think over that, if I was just playing over that for infinite amounts of time, what I would do is base some of my ideas around G major arpeggios. So I'd be playing. And making a conscious effort to target those notes so that it's a little more than obvious, that it sounds like I'm superimposing another chord over the top. Of course, the way I do it mightn't be that obvious, like that I'm just playing a. I would mix them in a lot more, but that's definitely the idea. Also, D major works great. So it's great. It really colours up the sound a lot. And plus, it gives you somewhere to go. Because I've been in situations where you've had like a one-chord vamp going on for a long time, and you've really got to start to explore some new territory. Otherwise, you'll drive yourself insane. when I'm thinking through chord changes, the philosophy I try and adopt is that as the chords change, wherever I am on the neck, my thought process has to change rather than shifting positions. Say if it was a chord progression just going from A7 to D7. If the A7 was happening and I'm playing and on that note the change goes to the D7, instead of going and like doing this huge position shift, what I would do is the minute I land on that G, it would all of a sudden become the 4 of the D chord. So A. So what I try to do is as the chords roll by, my perception of the note that I'm landing on changes rather than where I should be on the neck. I try to make it so that as the chords go by, at any point, at any note that I'm landing on, I know where I have to go to correspond with them rather than have to do a radical position shift. And that really works itself in well with this whole technique too, because you're covering a lot of ground with the 4 notes per string and the finger picking thing and everything. You do cover a lot of area on the neck. You rarely dwell in one spot for a long time, so it's important to get familiar with your note choice, and every now and then I get lucky and I kind of get it right. I am primarily self-taught, and I played by ear for a long time, purely going by instinct, hearing what I liked in a chord, and I knew that if I heard this chord, I could play. If I heard I didn't have any idea what the mode was. I didn't even really care. All I knew was that I had to change that note, and then I could play over that chord. So my ear developed to a point where I could pretty much hear changes go by and just follow them. And as long as I weren't too complex, I could get through them unscathed. As the music I gradually began to like involved more complex chord changes, I had to develop more of a knowledge of certain scales and that sort of some sort of technical aspects of it. But when I hear a chord, I can instantly tell what the thirds and the fifths, the sevenths and everything, all that sound like and their relationship to the note I'm playing. So that's how I navigate chord changes. I primarily go by ear, and it's actually not as bad as that might sound. You may think that's kind of a precarious way to do it, but the good thing is you can jump up on stage with pretty much anybody. Well, maybe not anybody, but jump up on stage with somebody and have a quick impromptu jam session, and you don't have to have a chart in front of you. You don't even really need to know what key the song is in. Just start playing and feel your way through it. So it becomes a very instinctive approach. I would definitely recommend that you develop your ear as much as possible, as well as the other aspect, of course, the technical aspect. A good tool I used for doing that is to simply play to the radio. Just put on the radio and solo over the chords to the records that they play, the tunes, and flow through the changes. And the good thing is if you can cop a station that has a playlist that isn't anything like you'd normally listen to, so you don't know any of the songs, you've got to think really fast to cop the changes, and that's generally the sort of practice method I use. Okay, so now I'm going to play some songs from our album, the album that I did with T.J. Helmrich, titled Quid Pro Quo. Obviously TJ's not here, he's in the studio at the moment mixing our follow-up album titled Exempt, and you'll probably notice that I'll be using a harmonizer to duplicate some of the harmony melodies we did on the tunes. The first song is a ballad titled Megan, and I decided to choose a ballad because it'll give you some of the ideas of the subtle phrasing, things you can get with legato, so you don't have to be ripping and burning and tearing all the time. Chord-wise in the tune, the first part of the solo is pretty much over a D minor, and I'll be playing D Dorian. Then it'll move to a C to B flat progression, which I'll probably dwell on B flat Lydian and that sort of thing. And towards the end of it, it will be pretty much a bluesy thing over A. My ideas will probably go back from A minor blues to A major blues, so it'll be great. Get some of my bluesy licks in there. So hope you enjoy it. Okay, the next tune is A Musical Oasis Awaits Us. And this particular song, I'll be once again stealing TJ's section. It's a very long vamp over D, and it's over a hip-hop sort of a feel, which is good because it's very challenging to sit back in a pocket on a tune like this. And I find it a hell of a challenge. You always want to just jump the gun and start taking off and hell-bent for leather, and before you know it, you're way ahead of the beat. So it's just real simple. I'll just be thinking my ideas around D Dorian, sort of that sort of thing. And then there is the section after that, which I soloed over on the album, which has a rather bizarre little half-step twist to it. It's over a rather heavy riff that goes... And once it gets to that point, I'll be thinking pretty much D minor, and then E flat altered, I do believe. So there should be lots of twists and turns in that one, I'm telling you now. So hope you like it. we're now about to embark upon our title track from our album Quid Pro Quo. Once again, a nice laid-back groove back in the pocket, and good because you can play like straight quarter note ideas and get into some nice triplet phrasing ideas, so look out for that sort of stuff. I'll be looking out for it too. And the chords, the first chord is, so pretty much just F-sharp Dorian. And then it goes to, so same thing. And then to B Dorian. To that chord. Still B Dorian. Then to this deadly chord, which a whole host of possibilities present themselves, either F-sharp harmonic minor, or G major or G Lydian or something like that. G Lydian. And also D melodic minor. And then it's back to. So, let's hope I don't crash and burn. as they say in the classics, it's been a beautiful thing. There's been a lot of love in the room, and I hope you got something beneficial out of it. I know I did. And I must say, it is interesting to examine your own style and find out some of the weird things that you do. You do learn a lot. So maybe when you get stuck in a rut in future, look to yourself rather than other people. Here I am, doing myself out of sales of this video, but you know what I mean. So thanks for joining me. It's been a pleasure.